Hey everybody, and welcome to Q&A Wednesday, where I answer the questions that you might have about health and fitness, or a question that some of my clients, or just seems to be a really popular question at the time. So actually I have a really great topic tonight. I want to talk a little bit about why I believe you should limit diet foods, and we're gonna quantify that in just a second. But just a quick story. I was at the grocery store the other day and standing in line behind this gal, and she had quite a bit of what I would consider diet food. She had rice cakes and lean cuisine pizzas and some other various things, diet soda. And I looked there and I thought, man, she has no quality protein sitting there. Everything that is in her basket there is a carbohydrate. And honestly, even though it's considered a diet food, it's, they're really still more of a quick carbohydrate that turns to sugar in your system really quickly. So I kept my mouth shut because, of course, it's none of my business. But, I think that we have the wrong idea about healthy eating. There's a balance there. We're going to talk a little bit about what I mean by diet foods and why I think it's kind of important to avoid a lot of, eating a lot of that. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you're just getting started about eating a little bit better and trying to make some healthy changes, obviously some of those tools are great. Way back when I first got started, I did use some of those freezer meals. I was working, I was actually substitute teaching because I have a teaching degree. And so, that's what I would take for my lunch. And of course, now that over the years, as I've learned a little bit more about that, honestly, flavor-wise, you couldn't make me eat one of those freezer meals, but there's a time and a place for that. But I find that a lot of people immediately go to some of those foods because they're quick and easy. And while, here and there is not a bad idea, and maybe as you're just trying to go from not so great eating to a little bit better eating, those might be some good tools. But here's the reasons why I think they're not quite as good for you as eating some whole fresh food, which we'll talk about in my tip section. So really, let me quantify the diet food. So again, there's a couple of directions that people think when they think diet food. But a lot of times, like I said, you want something quick, you want something easy, and I get it. We're all busy, but a lot of times those come down to things like bars. If you think about the companies that produce these diets, and they make these easy to eat, ready-made meals, and they talk about you can still have your muffins and this and that. First of all, think about it, guys. A lot of this product, even though it's a diet food, is shelf stable, which means that it's going to have additives and preservatives and things that really aren't good for you in them. Not only that, but I don't care if it's a healthier muffin, which again, I totally agree with. If you can make a healthier version of something, that is great. But most of the time, it's still a processed food, and it still a lot of times contains a whole lot of sugar. If you remember back into like the early 90s, when our country had this big whole thing on fat causes fat, and so everything came out low fat, the downside to that was all these low fat products then ended up with a crap ton of sugar in them because of course they had to add flavor somehow. So the downside to picking some of these foods is that even though they're considered diet foods, I don't know who considers them that, but the company that makes them, I guess, they still are processed. A lot of them are highly processed. And so they're still going to turn to sugar immediately in your system. So again, you kind of have to balance the goods and the bads of that. I have some tips for those of you that are super, super busy because I get it. I am like crazy busy. So I understand how that rolls. But there's some things you can do for that. So let's talk about the downside to eating some of those more considered diet foods. Now, some of you think, diet food, that just means eating a whole lot of vegetables and fruits, and true to an extent, but you really have to have a balanced diet. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the downside of eating some of these more processed type foods, and I'm going to give you some of what I think are the biggest offenders on that one in just a second. But if it is a highly processed food, whether it's a diet food or not, the first problem is that the research shows we tend to overeat up to 500 calories a day because those processed foods go through us so quickly that we're not satiated. So, kind of like, when you eat a great big meal, right? And maybe you had steak and potatoes and you're like, oh my word, I can't eat another thing. Well, then somebody breaks out the Hostess donuts and you're like, I could polish off the bag, right? Because they're not filling. They don't make you satiated. They don't trip those triggers in your body, those chemical hormonal triggers that say, dude, you're full. So there's a real downside to that. When some of those products are really highly processed, they're really not diet foods. They're actually causing more issues than they're solving. Um, Also, when you're eating some of those products, and again, I mean, come on, think quality of carbohydrates, guys. You don't stay full long enough, period. So unfortunately, you might feel okay once you eat it, but then an hour later you're starving again. And of course we want the goodies, right? That's the best part is, oh, I can still have a protein bar, I can still have this diet bar. Again, there's always trade-offs, guys. You got to look to make sure that you understand what you're eating, what you're getting, and that the trade-offs are worth it, because sometimes the side effects or the trade-off there is not as healthy as it possibly could be. And you might have some of those products that are in your daily routine that are sabotaging you a little bit. Sometimes they actually make you hungrier when you eat those kind of things. So that can be a problem. We just talked about that, a lot of those foods, I mean, I see those foods shelf stable all the time. That means there's something in them that makes them shelf stable, which obviously means they're not fresh, because otherwise they'd go bad really quickly. So again, you got to start to pay attention to that. And again, if you use a freezer meal once, lean cuisine, whatever, once or twice a week, not a big deal, especially if you're going from really eating the fairly unhealthy American diet, which is a bunch of garbage. Maybe that is a good step for you. Rock on. Take that step, starting a little bit cleaner, and then, work your way up to, that's how I rolled. In the beginning, all I did in the beginning was start tracking and realizing I was eating more than my body was burning. And then I started to make a little bit better choices than that. And of course, now I eat super clean, because now if I eat some sort of junk food, I'm miserable. I feel gross, and even sick. So I'm careful there. So you really have to pay attention to, again, if it's low fat, it's probably going to have added sugar, and sugar is in weird things that you wouldn't expect. I mean, ketchup, salad dressings. You have to really pay attention to the labels, and not just the top part of the label that lists how much sugar and all those nutrients that are in there. You have to pay attention to the actual the ingredients down at the bottom, because if you know what they mean, you start to realize, wow, they're adding all kinds of sugar. They're just listing it as different things so that they don't have to put it that there's actually sugar in it. It follows a huge loophole that I've talked about before. If the product contains less than 0.5 grams per serving size, that serving size might only be 1/4 of a teaspoon. That is not a lot, right? They don't have to list it as containing sugar. It follows under that loophole. So you have to pay attention to the actual ingredient list and make sure that you're paying attention to anything that ends in ose. There's also alternative forms of sugar, like corn syrup solids. All of those count. They just don't have to necessarily list them in the label. So pay attention to that. I think really thinking about the different types of diet food. Now, I'm not saying health food, because I kind of feel like those are in slightly different realms, and they kind of encompass different things. But in general, diet foods make you think a little bit differently about food, right? Again, it's kind of I can still have cake. Well, it's still cake. It's still, if it's a better version, rock on. But if you're getting it in a boxed, shelf-stable form, probably not your best choice there. So again, there's really some downsides. What it ends up doing is it sabotages your goals to live a healthier lifestyle. Over time, if you just learn to make a little bit better choices, eventually you will start to realize that anything that's fresh, like fresh produce, whole proteins, those are just better options. Not only that'll keep you fuller longer, and I'm going to talk about that in a second on my tip page. So here's what I think are the worst offenders, right? Number one, diet bars, cereal bars, protein bars. Now, they're not all created equal. You really have to pay attention to the ingredients, but the downside to protein bars is, man, there's some out there that you might as well eat a Snickers, because it's just as bad. You really have to pay attention to it. They need to be low sugar. There's a couple of them that are fairly decent. I'm more of a fan. However, again, I have my limitations, because when I start eating protein bars, to me, they taste like candy bars, and then it's hard to stop. So I use protein bars as a plan B or plan C, primarily when I'm traveling, because it is, I can put it in my backpack and it doesn't go bad. And if I get stuck or I'm unable to get enough food, or my food that I take with me goes bad, that and protein powder and tuna packets usually carry me through. So again, there's a place and time for that, but I don't eat them on a daily basis, because to me, again, it's just like eating a candy bar. And then when I start, I can't stop. So one protein bar a day turns into 2, which turns into every meal being a protein bar. So you have to be careful there. And again, you have to be careful what they're made of. Another one is anything that's low fat. Like I said, I remember when we were being told fat causes fat. which is not true. The problem with that, of course, is that everything is very high carb, high sugar, because it has to have flavor there somewhere. You know, I know that a lot of companies have kind of looked at bringing out healthier versions of food. The downside is a lot of times when they bring that out, it just doesn't sell. And so they go back to the drawing board. You know, we all want the mouthfeel, we want the flavor, we want the taste. And so again, they're going to make what is in demand, which a lot of times is just something that's tastier and a lot of times processed. Be careful of organically processed foods that list them as being organic. An organic cookie still has a ton of sugar in it. To me, that makes no difference. I'm more concerned about my organic food should be, the fresh produce and fresh, like grass-fed meats and things like that. When it comes in a box, it's still a processed food. So again, you have to really know. I think they really work to make it confusing, and they label things to sound really super healthy when they're not always that healthy. I can walk through more of a health foods style store like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's and pull things off the shelf and go, okay, that's great that it shows that it's like locally produced, locally sourced, non-GMO, organic. I'm like, but look at the sugar content. Holy moly. So again, you have to figure out if that trade-off is okay for you. And unfortunately, it's not always your best option. My favorites, like healthier versions of things like thin Oreos, or now you've seen like the dark chocolate thin Reese's peanut butter cups. That's fantastic because we're all thinking, okay, well, I can have that because that's just, I'm not going to have as much. The problem is we end up eating double the amount or more because there's some little thing that goes on our heads that thinks, well, it's okay, it's healthier, right? So we end up just justifying eating more of it, which is a problem. Same thing with like protein ice cream. And again, it's obviously a better version than the full sugar thing. But we have to be careful because it still does contain sugar and it's still a processed food. So, my tip on that one, honestly, is going to be the more that you can make those things from scratch and make them at home because you can control the ingredients, the better off you're going to be because number one, you're not going to be willing to make that all the time. When it's so convenient to pull it off the grocery store shelves, you're probably going to eat more than you should, right? And then we go back for more because that's the purpose. They want to sell us more. If you make it at home, you know that you're not using a bunch of extra ingredients and additives and preservatives. It becomes definitely a better product for you. So keep that in mind. Anything that is packaged and frozen. Now, that being said, obviously things like flash frozen vegetables, and of course, we get some different fishes, tilapia and swai, and some different things come in a frozen form. But for the most part, I'm talking about things like the healthy meals, in a box. Number one, they taste like cardboard. I don't know. I think they taste like cardboard. Again, I utilized those when I was first kind of learning my way through becoming a healthier person. But at this point, you can't make me eat those. Honestly, I'd rather save up and eat the real version than once in a blue moon rather than eat that kind of garbage on a daily basis. The downside too is, again, even though it's frozen, it's still going to contain things that aren't necessarily as healthy for you, like sodium. So many of those contain so much sodium. Now we need some sodium in order to help our electrolyte balance stay in the right amounts, right? But most Americans get way too much sodium, which can contribute to high blood pressure and some other things. So again, you have to make sure that you're doing the best for yourself that you possibly can. And when you're utilizing those kind of things, like I said, I wouldn't do that on a regular basis. Like eating one of those on a daily basis for lunch, just again, personally not a fan, but I've done it. I've been there where it served a purpose for me for a while I was learning what was probably the best options for my body. So keep that in mind. We talked a little bit about protein cookies and protein ice cream and things like that. Okay, guys, protein cookies still contain sugar. It still contains flour. There's some great versions on Instagram, or I mean not Instagram, Pinterest, that contain like protein powder and stuff like that. Make your own version. Yeah, they might not last as long if you just leave them sitting on the counter. At some point they're gonna go bad because they're made with fresher ingredients. But you avoid the additives and preservatives of some of those products. Not only that, I'm trying to think of the brand. There's several brands now of protein cookies, and some of them are just better than others. But the one that I'm thinking about had somebody come and ask me one day, what do you think about these? I said, well, send me a picture of the backside. And she said, I'm really confused because on the front it shows that it has 8 grams of protein and I can't remember, like 15 or something, 20 grams of sugar. That much sugar, right? And she goes, but on the back it says it's got 16 grams of protein and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, because you got to look at the serving size. That's actually 2 servings in that protein cookie. And she said, oh my gosh, I've been eating 2 of these a day. Okay, well, let's add up the sugar in 2 of those a day. It's like 60 grams of sugar, whatever it ended up being. That's a lot of sugar. And you think you're eating something healthy. That's the frustration, is that they're really not necessarily as healthy as you think they are. They're just labeled that way. So be careful of that. The last one I want to talk about, the biggest offender to me, is diet soda. Now, while diet soda might be a little bit better version than the full sugar version of it, it still contains some stuff, you guys. Read the label. A lot of diet colas still contain aspartame, which has been shown to cause cancer in lab rats. So again, I know we can't, totally look at that as being dependent upon, like that's what's going to happen to people. But in the long term, I know that they generally recognize it as safe, but why would you want to do that to yourself when really there's no 100% safety factor of that? Diet soda can actually cause just as much hunger as regular sodas, because of course, it's still clicking things in your brain that can cause hunger. So, be careful of that. You're better off to just, have some, if you gotta have the bubbles, if you gotta have some carbonated something or other, get one of the soda streams. You can choose your own flavors, those kind of things, or get some sparkling water. Those are just better options. I know, I'm preaching from, this is the person that's addicted to Zero Monsters. But again, we have to figure out what our trade-offs are going to be for that. So here's some tips in order to really pay attention to what is probably the healthiest version. Now, again, most of us need to start somewhere. Please don't beat yourself up and don't think that you're bad when you fall off the wagon or make a choice that's not so great. Your goal is to do it consistently over time. It's not to be perfect on a daily basis, or oh my gosh, I messed up today, so I'm gonna call it F it, and I'm gonna eat whatever the hell I want for the rest of the day. Okay, so now you're just turning insult into injury. Put it in MyFitnessPal and see how you feel about that when you're done. It's okay if you mess up once in a while. It's not even messing up. It's just about learning to figure out what your balance is and what works best for you towards your goals. So number 1 tip. Eat more protein, especially animal protein. Yes, I'm definitely think about making better choices there. Like I said, such as grass-fed beef. Elk and deer are great. Bison is great. The problem with, of course, a lot of people's problem with eating a lot of animal protein is the way the animals are treated. Totally agree. The fact that they're shoved full of hormones. Totally understand. But there are ways to get better options of that. Unlike eggs. Eggs are a complete protein, but the biggest benefit of protein, besides building and maintaining muscle, is that they keep you satiated longer. It is a thermogenic nutrient that takes your body has to rev it up hotter to break it down. So it'll make you stay fuller longer. It's just a better, most women in general don't get enough protein on a daily basis, which I find fascinating. Again, I think it just stems from the fact, I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to eat 1,200 calories. It's got to be low fat. So now I'm going to eat a bunch of carbs. Pretzels are healthy. What? Whoever decided pretzels were healthy? Yeah, they taste good, but they're not exactly your healthiest option. Go for fresh. If your best bet, man, farmer's market is awesome. Shop the outside of the grocery store, the perimeter. That's where all of the produce and the animal proteins are. And again, if you're really being picky about what you're getting, go to somewhere that carries locally sourced items. That's your best bet. Go to the butcher, raise a calf or a cow, have it cut up and put it in your freezer. It gives you options versus having to go to the grocery store every day. I think in this country, we've really gotten away from home cooking, preparation. We're in such a hurry. We forget that the trade-off about eating fast food all the time and eating all these pre-prepared meals is that we're not getting the best options. We're not getting the best value of food, nor are we getting the freshest, healthiest that's available to us. So it does take some planning, which is also one of my tips, is that the busier you are, the more prepared you need to be. I, on a daily basis, am out of the house most of the day. I'm here, there, everywhere. I don't always have time to come home. I carry a cooler everywhere I go. I prep twice a week. If I want to change something, I change it that day. If I don't want steak today, maybe I'm gonna have salmon, change that out for the rest of the week. But I prepare in bulk because at least I know I'm getting the things that my body needs in order to stay going. I'm aware that food is more than just fuel, although that is why we eat it, right? We eat for the nutrients, we eat for the vitamins and minerals. I'm aware that we eat for other reasons, social. I'm the first one to tell you, I know all about eating my feelings, but we got to look at its primary use, which is keeping our body moving. It's energy. Our body needs to break it down and use it as fuel. So I'm not going to tell you that I don't ever have things that I love. I do. I just don't have them every day. There was a time in my life that I ate chocolate on a daily basis because that's how you finish a meal. But at this point, I still love chocolate, but I don't get it that often. And if I do, maybe it's the protein powder that I'm using for the day. So I at least feel like I'm getting something great. These days, man, sweet potatoes are my candy. I love fruit. Oh my word. I get fruit, like a cup of fruit every other morning. Raspberries are in season. I'm in heaven at this point. So again, once you start eating healthier, your body actually adjusts. Your taste buds actually adjust to healthier whole foods as well, which is great. Again, really be careful, not just health food or diet food that is at the grocery store. Also pay attention to what you're getting when you go out to eat, whether it's fast food, whether it's sit-down restaurants. A lot of times, the restaurant will advertise it as being a very much healthier option, but if you start really looking at the details or maybe go online and look at their website, you realize that salad right there has more calories than the hamburger. So it really kind of comes down to what are you putting on it? Are you using the salad dressing that has a bunch of garbage in it and it's not as good for you? You can always work, adjust things to make them work for you. Make special requests. Most restaurants are okay with that these days. They know that there's certain people trying to make healthier decisions. And so you might ask, hey, instead of the French fries, can I just have some steamed broccoli? Yeah, I get it. Doesn't sound as good, right? But if I do that on a regular basis, then when I do really want those French fries, I don't feel so bad about it. So making, great choices and knowing ahead what you're going to do makes it a whole lot easier than walking in the door of the restaurant and smelling your favorite wings and then just going, I'm going to eat that instead. So here's a way that I would look at things. Again, you're looking at do better, then do way better, then do great. Eating optimal, if you're really struggling to cut out junk food, is going to be really tough, and you're not going to be able to stick with it. So in the beginning, you might just focus on, am I burning more calories than I'm eating? If I'm eating a surplus of calories, there in all likelihood is going to be weight gain caused with that. So, focus on that first and make sure that your energy in, energy out balance is either equal or that you're eating, if you're trying to lose fat, you might eat at a small deficit. Again, too big of a deficit, then your body's going to automatically think it's starving. But in the beginning, you might just make some small, healthier changes, but pay attention more to, am I eating more than I'm burning? Then once you've got that down, then start paying attention to the macronutrients, which are proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Am I just eating all over the place? Am I eating too many carbs? My body won't use fat as fuel if I'm providing it everything that it needs from the carbohydrates that I eat every day. So that might be the next thing that you start paying attention to. Use MyFitnessPal. Be careful of the algorithm that MyFitnessPal uses. They use a basic algorithm for everybody. It's not always appropriate. And I've really quickly discovered that for some of my gals who are much smaller people, it automatically tells them 1,200 calories. I'm like, your Fitbit just told me you burn 2,000 calories a day. 1,200 is not appropriate. So again, you have to do a little bit more thinking or talk to somebody who knows more about nutrition to make sure that you're on the right balance for that. Then once you have that down, then you gotta start thinking about the quality of the macros, right? Because a Pop-Tart and an apple are both simple sugars, but one is definitely void of nutrients, and one of them is full of vitamins, minerals, and fiber, which slows down the absorption rate of the sugar into our bloodstream. So you need to start paying attention to that. The great thing is if you look at your overall nutrition and it's not super fabulous at the moment, any changes that you make are going to show you results at the moment. So, you don't have to run out there and eat super clean right from day one. Just start making a little bit better choices, clean it up, and you're going to see results. After you get all that down, then you might think a little bit more about nutrient timing, when to eat your carbohydrates. Should I add carbohydrates and fats in the same meals? But if you're just getting started, that shouldn't even be on the radar yet. So stop researching all the details or the magic diets that work. Just make some better choices with that. So hopefully that's made some sense to you. Again, I grew up kind of in a world where diet food became super popular. I remember as a kid, you know, oh, we gotta eat better. Oh, I can tell you some stories. But looking at what's available now, and the fact that I know we need convenient. I know we need to be able to take it with us and eat it in the car, and all the things that we have to do that help us to still live the lifestyle that we have, considering it's so busy. But just making some really great changes from the get-go and paying attention to really what those foods mean and whether or not they're really best for what your goals are within trying to live a healthy lifestyle. So have an incredible night, you guys. Again, I'm not sure that there's going to be a Meals with Melissa this weekend. We will be at the Cascadian, NPC Cascadian this weekend in Bend, Oregon for the show. Pretty excited about that. And then the following week we have Boise. So show up, cheer the team on. Fillmore Fitness is going to be there. We're pretty excited. But then I'll be right back. I love doing Meals with Melissa on Sundays. I love coming up with better versions of things. The last one, that low carb brownie, yeah, that was pretty awesome. I highly recommend you make it a little bit molten, and it's amazing. So have an incredible night, you guys, and until next week, that is Q&A Wednesday. Please leave comments below, or if you have a question that you would like to ask, or something that really sounds kind of like a myth and you're not sure, definitely ask, or you can direct message me at Facebook Messenger. I do respond. So have a great night, you guys. And that's Q&A Wednesday. See you soon.